What do you feed a zombie for breakfast in the morning? Well, how about a bowl of brain flakes? Released in 1993 for the SNES as well as the Sega Genesis, Zombies Ate My Neighbors is a top-down shooter that follows its protagonists, Zeke and Julie, on a mission to stop a variety of monsters and B-movie antagonists from harming, maiming, and, well, killing Zeke and Julie's neighbors. Developed by LucasArts and published by Konami, the game received positive marks upon its release despite not being much of a hit. However, while it didn't immediately catch on, and much like the B-movies that inspired it, it eventually worked its way to cult status and has since become a beloved staple of the 16-bit era. So much so that the game and its sequel Ghoul Patrol are actually about to get a re-release for modern platforms. Also, side note, they should totally consider making a third installment to the series and call it Monster Squad. You know, like the movie being Monster Squad. Which is actually part of what brings me here today, because I've somehow managed to go almost 26 years without actually sitting down and playing Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Which is especially weird for me because just about everything about this game is right up my alley. Like the Joan Jett album. Up my alley. I think it's up your alley, actually. I've actually loved B-movies for as long as I can remember, and on many occasions growing up loved making parodies of them with my friends. And yeah, they were terrible, like really, really terrible, but they meant a lot to me at the time.
I see the usual gang of misfits and dope addicts are here.
Janet?
So yeah, I've always loved watching B-movies, and I've always loved being a knockoff Cinemassacre, so getting to sit down and properly play Zombies Ate My Neighbors has been a long time coming. And overall, I, perhaps unsurprisingly, really liked the game. It was loaded with references to classic horror movies, had this amazing 50s culture revived in the 80s rockabilly attitude, and it even has co-op. Although, for this review, I did end up playing this one alone. Despite my best efforts, I just couldn't get anyone to play through this one with me. But does it hold up? Because while the game has its classic horror and sci-fi references down, that doesn't always translate to being a good game, much less one that has necessarily aged that well close to 30 years later. Before we continue though, a quick question of the day. What is your favorite game to passively play while you watch TV? I'm gonna be real with you guys and admit that I've recently taken to recording gameplay for videos from my old Samsung S9 via its surprisingly good screen recorder while I play games on it. It's totally changed how I play games these days due to it allowing me to record clean, crisp gameplay from anywhere in the house for any emulated consoles, as well as my PS5 and even my Steam library through game streaming. It's also reignited my love for the Puzzle League series, which I also play a ton of on my Nintendo Switch. My go-to way to decompress after a long day or when I'm not feeling well in general is to basically lay in bed, propped up on pillows looking homeless while I watch retro sitcoms on Pluto TV and play a couple rounds of Puzzle League. Be sure to leave your answer to the question of the day over in the comments. I'd love to hear about the games that you all like to play passively. And with that out of the way, on with the video. Zombies Ate My Neighbors takes place across 48 levels that are themed from everything from your neighbor's backyard to Dracula's castle, the inside of a pyramid, and the all-American shopping mall. In them, you're tasked with rescuing people from the stage's various enemies before they can get massacred or mutilated.
Save the cheerleader, save the world.
cheerleader square, 색깔 square.
Yeah, that's what I said.
To do so, you'll have to navigate the stages and mow down hordes upon hordes of enemies with the wide variety of weapons that you'll find along the way. These include things like soda cans, which can be lobbed like grenades, a weed whacker, which can be used to kill enemies Lawnmower Man style, or a fire extinguisher that can be used to temporarily freeze your enemies like you're the frickin' Terminator.
Hasta la vista, baby.
There are tons of weapons that you can pick up alongside those ones too, and they're scattered just about everywhere in the game, which is great due to how unbelievably outnumbered you are. What's also great about many of the weapons in the game is that certain ones are especially effective against specific enemies. And believe me, any excuse you have to make the game a bit easier is one that you best consider using, because Zombies Ate My Neighbors is far from what I'd consider to be a walk in the park, and it doesn't feature saving or any difficulty options. Those aren't bad things though, as the game is designed and paced in a way that's mostly in line with these limitations. For example, you can pick up the action from any level of the game as long as you know the stage's corresponding password. And you can also beat most, if not all of those stages in a fresh playthrough, so long as you manage to find some weapons to power up your arsenal. The only real exception to this that I personally found playing through the game was in level 20, the Invasion of the Snakeoids, which featured giant snakes that take forever to kill and renewed my fear of Ophidians. There's nothing wrong with the level in itself, but the giant snakes that populate it take a ridiculously long time to kill unless you know how to aim your bazooka. Oh yeah, how could I forget to tell you that you get a freaking bazooka in the game? Unfortunately for me though, it was mostly wasted because I'm just not that much of a great shot. Anyway, one of the other things that can aid you in your adventure is the multitude of shortcuts and alternate paths through each of the levels. A well-placed rocket or punch, if you're using one of the game's many power-ups, can open cracked walls and allow you to either skip rooms with enemies in them or help you find some additional goodies. On top of that, knowing the layout of the level in general may allow you to beat it while bypassing particularly tough opponents altogether. When it comes down to it, all of this actually makes Zombies Ate My Neighbors a fairly strategic game that rewards players who take the time to explore every nook and cranny of the world and who have the dexterity and skill to navigate it without getting a game over. However, I personally struggled with Zombies Ate My Neighbors and ended up relying on passwords a few times, as well as a healthy number of save states on my emulator to get through the game. And while I know that save stating your way through games is a bit of a hot topic amongst retro gamers, I have no regrets about doing so because of how engrossed I was in the world and wanting to see what else it had in store for me. I simply had a great time seeing the different enemies and themes found in each of the levels. Overall, Zombies Ate My Neighbors reminds me a lot of games like Gauntlet, only with less and more
Brains, I'm alright. I'll eat the brains till the zombified.
However, that's not to say that the game is perfect. For starters, depth perception can be a bit hard to make heads or tails of. It's pretty easy to misline shots or occasionally even the distance between you and some enemies due to the overhead perspective. You do adapt to it eventually, but it is something that does take some getting used to. On top of that, while I absolutely adore the variety of enemies in the game, there's no denying that some of them can get pretty frustrating. I've already talked about the Snake Boys, those awful, awful Snake Boys, but the game also features enemies such as these demonic little dolls that are really hard to hit, as well as these chainsaw-wielding maniacs that can create and take shortcuts to chase you around the level.
Mike, you wanna see my new chainsaw and hockey mask?
I understand the importance of enemies like this in a game, especially for difficulty scaling reasons and because they're modeled after famous horror characters, but there's no denying that a certain chill goes down my spine whenever I see them. Although to be fair, while frustrating to deal with and something that I often outright avoid, these characters add tension to the game by making you feel more like they're prey than a predator. There's a certain thrill to playing through the game and finding yourself getting chased by enemies, only to slip through a shortcut or temporarily freeze them in order to make an escape. And I can only imagine what with this game's reputation as a classic co-op caper, that doing so with a friend makes it all the more fun. Again, I wouldn't really know though on account of being such a lonely, self-indulgent sad sack. Though, I guess those doppelgangers that follow you around in some levels are kinda like having friends. Visually speaking, Zombies Ate My Neighbors gets a lot out of its home on 16-bit hardware. The game features a dazzling color palette that's appropriately playful and macabre. On top of that, it also features wonderful sprite work that does a great job of conveying the atmosphere of a classic B or horror movie. The game just feels like a work of love from a bunch of film aficionados who had to have painstakingly and lovingly crafted the look and feel of the game with the best of tools.
A chainsaw.
I'm especially big on the game's use of dithering and how it adds layers upon layers of details to the visuals. Even though the SNES can handle transparency, I've always loved when developers would rely on dithering to simulate a variable opacity instead. There's just something really endearing about the kind of technical showmanship at work here. It's similar to how artists employ something like cross-hatching in their work as opposed to using shading with different colors. And with a good CRT or shaders on an emulator, there's no denying how good that dithering will look when it's blended thanks to scanlines. It really does a great job of bringing the environments of the game to life and makes them feel either lived in or appropriately mythical depending on the environments of a particular level. The game's various character designs are also all on point from a design perspective. They walk that fine line of directly recalling their source material while also taking the necessary liberties to make these characters both their own and to avoid any legal repercussions over any similarities to their Universal Studios incarnations. If you even have a passing interest in vintage horror movies, or even something like Tim Burton movies, you're sure to have a blast with this game and its visual style. And that Tim Burton comparison also extends into what I think of the game's music and sound too. The soundtrack really reminds me of Danny Elfman's work, and it comes across as extremely playful. Not to mention, it does a great job of inviting the player into the over-the-top and cartoony game world. It's also pretty diverse and knows when to slow things down and to be more atmospheric, while never letting up on how catchy it is. You could seriously tell me that some of these songs were Oingo Boingo demos, and I wouldn't bat an eye. They're just so kooky and eclectic, as well as appropriate to what's going on in the game. Take a song like Pyramid of Fear from the game, which seriously reminds me of Oingo Boingo's song Forbidden Zone from the absurdly offensive 1982 movie of the same name. Total side note, Forbidden Zone is arguably their best song, and the movie is not worth watching. Seriously, it's offensive. However, there's more to the game's sound than just a wonderful soundtrack. It also has sound effects that are appropriately horror-themed and arcadey. There's just something deeply satisfying about running up to a zombie in the game and hearing them explode as you shoot them with your water gun. The explosion sound that plays when they die is a really bassy sound for the SNES, and other enemies also feature appropriate screams or other sound effects when you defeat them. Even stuff like the clown power-up have some pretty great sound effects to them. While the clown power-up admittedly has a bit of an annoying laugh, I also kinda love it due to how uncannily similar it is to the Joker's laugh in Tim Burton's Batman. All in all, Zombies Ate My Neighbors has really solid sound design across the board. It can get a little heavy on the constant screaming of the ghouls and baddies as you kill them, but the actual quality of the sound coming out of your Super Nintendo is superb. So does Zombies Ate My Neighbors hold up? Well, seeing as I've just spent over 10 minutes gushing about nearly everything about the game, I think you know the answer is a resounding yes. The game is an extremely charming and fun adventure that may be challenging, but still manages to do a mostly fine job of preventing itself from becoming frustrating. And even for players that are less interested or familiar with B-movies or horror, I feel as though the game does a fine job of standing out on its own and providing a fun and fulfilling gameplay experience. If you do like these things though, you're in for an especially great game that's loaded with enough pop culture references to fill in Elvira's movie macabre. Thanks to the game getting a modern re-release, there's honestly no reason not to pick Zombies Ate My Neighbors up. While I didn't get to play it in co-op for this video, I can see the appeal of it, and I can definitely tell why it's become such a standard of couch co-op gaming. And as for the game itself, while distinctly being 16-bit, it's actually aged quite well in spite of it and wears that as a badge of honor. And as for the parts of the game that haven't aged quite as well, they've, at least for me, become a part of the game's charm over time. It's actually a lot like the special effects in cheesy B-movies. It's painfully obvious that there were some technical restrictions that may or may not have impacted the development of the game, but it's part of the game's charm now, so we may as well enjoy it. And with that said and done, that brings us to the end of today's video. Feel free to leave an answer to the question of the day over in the comments, or to leave a recommendation for a future game that you'd like to see reviewed. You can also hit me up on Twitter or Instagram by searching for NichePlays on those respective sites, or by following the link in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video, and that if you decide to play through Zombies Ate My Neighbors for the first time, or you just pick it up alone or with a friend sometime soon, that you have a great time doing so. So yeah. Bye.